Alright, folks, let's dive straight into the deep end. No beating around the bush here. Today on Curious Neighbor Podcast, we're tackling the burning question: why we think politics are dumb? Yeah, you heard it correctly, dump with a D. Now, I won't sugarcoat it. Politics often leave us scratching our heads. And no, it's not about calling anyone stupid. It's about unraveling the complexities that make us question the decisions and actions of our politicians. So, picture this. I spend my days immersed in a sea of global data. And trust me, it's no walk in the park. I won't pretend I've combed through every report, chart, or poll, because, let's face it, that's practically impossible. Just a regular day, sipping on my morning coffee, scrolling through the news, and what catches my eye? A ranking of the most overpaid professions in some country. Details are a bit fuzzy, but here's the kicker: in the top 5 is the profession of a politician. Now, that raises some eyebrows, doesn't it? We're all aware that politicians have a lot on their plates, but overpaid? That got me thinking, and here we are, diving into the tangled world of politics. So, grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's navigate through the twists and turns together. Stay with me, it's bound to be an eye-opener. Alright, buckle up, listeners, because this rabbit hole goes even deeper. So, I'm sitting there, contemplating this ranking of overpaid professions, and naturally, I turn to the oracle of our time, Google. I type in most overpaid professions. And where does it lead me? Right to the YouGov survey. Now, this survey pulled the thoughts of 3,000 American adults, asking them about the most overpaid profession. And you know what topped the list? Drumroll please, politicians. It seems like we're not the only ones having these thoughts. But it's not just about the money. We've got trust issues too. I mean, let's be real, who do we trust the least? According to an online survey from 2022, politicians take the crown as the least respected profession worldwide. The survey spanned 28 countries, with a minimum of 500 participants from each. Now, brace yourself for this. The average level of trust in politicians sits at a whopping 12%. Yeah, you heard it right, 12%. But hey, let's break it down. France? 14%. Italy? 11%. The United States? A solid 10%. And it keeps going down, Spain at 8%, Japan at 7%. Ouch. Now, there are some shining stars on this trust scale. India leads the pack with 28% trust, Denmark at 21%, and Germany at 18%. If you're curious for all the nitty-gritty details, check out the description for all the juicy stats. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. You might be thinking, hey, it's just one survey. Maybe it doesn't include my country, or perhaps it's biased. And you know what? If those thoughts cross your mind, kudos to you. It's crucial not to swallow everything we hear without a hint of skepticism. After all, we're diving into a sea of online surveys, and questions about their credibility are more than valid. Now, you might be wondering who conducted these surveys and for whom? Were they inclusive, or did they perhaps leave out a chunk of the population? Valid concerns, my friend. The online nature of these surveys does raise eyebrows about potential exclusion of older individuals. Skepticism is a healthy reaction, and I'm glad it's stirring in your mind. And let's face it, not listing all opinions from every corner of the globe here. I trust you, dear listener, to do a bit of independent fact-checking. The key takeaway is to verify the source of the data. I've had my fair share of joy and frustration delving into data, discovering how information from one country gets thrown around, and editors sometimes forget to mention that the data might not apply universally. Now, with that somewhat lengthy disclaimer out of the way, how does all of this tie into the notion of the stupidity of politicians? Well, the common thread in these negative rankings, where politicians are riding high, is crystal clear. It's a societal generalization. We see politicians as not overly competent, earning more than their knowledge justifies, and let's face it, we don't trust them much either. This concoction paints a picture of less than intelligent folks in political positions. Now, am I oversimplifying? Perhaps. But I'm not here to dwell on the surface. We're about to break this down into atoms. It's not about saying everyone in politics shouldn't be there. It's about showcasing how we construct this imaginative framework that nudges us towards a less than flattering perception of politicians. And hey, if you're catching on to the pattern, you'll realize this perception spills over into how we view other topics and individuals. Stick around, it's about to get even more intriguing. Alright, let's dive into the heart of the matter, the intricate dance between democracy, our voting habits, and the perception of politicians. So, here's the deal. A democratic government is made up of individuals chosen by the will of society. Sounds great, right? Well, not so fast. It's like stepping onto a minefield. Think about it. In a democracy, the government won't please everyone because, surprise, everyone has different views. It's a melting pot of opinions. But here's where it gets tricky. Our voting habits create a sort of black and white image for us. We tend not to vote for politicians with completely opposite views. So, when they make decisions we disagree with, boom, we label it as wrong. That's the black side. But what about the white side? When we vote for someone, we're not blind to their flaws. It's like choosing the lesser evil. Now, here's where Benjamin Franklin, the guy from the 18th century, metaphorically steps in. He had a nifty trick up his sleeve, turning enemies into friends. How? By asking them for a small favor or advice. Picture this. Imagine someone you don't particularly like comes to you, asking to borrow a book you don't need. What do? You lend it to them, right? But now, here's the twist. Cognitive dissonance kicks in. Your brain wonders why you helped someone you don't like. And because our brains love order, they start to shift that person from the dislike category to indifferent, or even friendly. It's like a psychological Jedi mind trick, and it's pretty darn useful in life. Let's circle back to voting for a politician whose views don't entirely align with ours. Our brain kicks into action, trying to whitewash that person to align with our voting decision. Alright, let's talk about the media, that ever-present force that keeps us in the loop during the reign of our political overlords. Now, I won't be dropping any bombshells by saying the media thrives on negativity. It's like the fuel that keeps the news engine running. Negative news captures attention, gets more views, and voila, a media success story. Now, here's the twist. Despite knowing this, we still want to stay informed about what's happening in the world. But hey, there's a catch. The media tends to heat up negative emotions, making it a bit challenging to associate politicians with anything positive. Even if they make a stellar investment that benefits the state budget, we often brush it off if it originated from the previous government's time. Not as interesting, right? Politicians are no fools. They willingly dive into the polarization pool. Why? Because it stirs up their voters against rival parties, solidifying their electoral base. It's like a chess move to prevent the undecided from wandering off to the other side. But here's where it gets interesting. Negative stuff sticks more. And there's a reason behind it. Back in the day, when survival was a daily battle, people needed to remember threats for their well-being. Fast forward to today, and this deep-seated inclination to remember the negatives still lingers. Think of it as an avalanche of reinforcement, where both the media's penchant for negativity and our brain's inclination to remember negatives team up to create a powerful impact. So, next time you catch yourself drowning in a sea of negative news, remember, it's not just you, it's a little dance between the media and our brains. Let's tackle the myth that every decision made by politicians is a recipe for disaster, said with a healthy dose of humor, of course. But let's peel back the layers and look at how decisions are cooked up at the highest level. Politicians, much like you and me in our respective workplaces, have access to a treasure trove of information that ordinary citizens might not possess. It's not some grand conspiracy, it's just a different perspective. Think about it. If you work in one industry and chat with a friend in a different field, you both bring information to the table that the other might not have. It's not secret knowledge, it's just impossible to be an expert in every area of life. So, when politicians face tough decisions, they can lean on their knowledge and choose what's more beneficial for the country, even if it's not the most popular choice with the majority. Ideally. Unfortunately, it often goes the other way. Politicians sometimes opt for what people want, banking on support in the next election rather than prioritizing the greater good. Now, here's the thing. A robust channel of communication between politicians and society could make it easier to explain these decisions. But let's not forget the underlying beauty of democracy. We elect someone to think for us, freeing us up to focus on our day-to-day lives. Speaking of mistakes, we're all human, right? When was the last time you made a blunder? Maybe a less than stellar investment with your savings? We've all been there. But let's expand the scope a bit. Imagine you hear that politicians have once again squandered millions on unsuccessful investments. Now, I'm not endorsing this. It's more about sparking some critical thinking. See, these numbers might seem astronomical to us regular folks, but in the grand scheme, they could be small percentages of the national budget. A tiny error, when dealing with a massive budget, can result in an unimaginable figure. Remember the delicate art of compromise, a complicated dance of national economies and international cooperation. Picture the national economy as a network of interconnected vessels. A tiny shift in one sector can set off a chain reaction, like a financial avalanche. And internationally, it's a negotiation tango where we aim for favorable conditions for our country. But, and here's the catch, some folks view favorable conditions as taking all we want and giving nothing in return. It's like expecting a one-way street. But hold on, even if we secure a sweet deal because the other party is in a tight spot, remember, the tables can turn. So, why expect mercy when the winds of change blow our way? We've talked about human mistakes, but what about bad intentions? Let's zoom out and take a broader look at the life of a politician. It's not a cushy 9-to-5 gig for decades. No, it's a long-haul battle. And if luck smiles upon you, you get your 5 minutes of power. After that, it's the uncertainty of the next term. This system can fuel the human tendency to exploit situations for financial security, in simpler terms, corruption. Companies, businesses, influential individuals, they all might want the current situation or legal regulations to look vastly different. And guess what? Some might even throw a substantial budget into the mix because a tweak in the law could multiply their profits. This is where the agreement plane between parties forms, with public opinion often being the stumbling block. Corruption isn't always a headline grabber, it can creep in unexpectedly. Picture this: a fresh-faced, relatively unknown politician without deep pockets receives a hefty promotional capital boost early in their career. The catch? They become indebted to their generous donors in the future. It's a murky world, my friends, and while there are ways to significantly reduce such cases, that's a tale for another time. Let's shine a light on a perennial source of public disappointment in the realm of politics: the often jarring gap between electoral promises and the harsh reality of governance. It's like a tale as old as time, right? Politicians, during their campaigns, paint vivid pictures and make grand promises that resonate with the dreams and expectations of the voters. Yet, when the rubber meets the road, the journey from rhetoric to action is a bumpy ride, marked by challenges, compromises, and unforeseen obstacles. The result? A sense of disillusionment and skepticism among the public. At the heart of this disillusionment is the prevailing belief that politics is a playground for the elite, an exclusive club where decisions are made by a select few. And this notion stretches beyond the walls of political offices to envelop the broader societal landscape. It's not just about politicians, it extends to individuals wielding significant wealth and influence across various sectors. The deep-seated belief that these decision-makers and power players exist in exclusive circles, seemingly detached from the everyday struggles and aspirations of the majority, nurtures skepticism toward the entire political process. Well, there you have it, folks. We've peeled back the layers on the gaps between promises and governance, the belief in an elite political class, and the skepticism that permeates our views on politics. Remember, this podcast can't cover every nook and cranny, and I'm sure there are more perspectives out there. So, share your thoughts in the comments section. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious and question the narratives.